Bad fates do not always follow those who deserve them. Lee Bardugo. Welcome back to The Cellar. It was March 1962 in an area just outside of Mexico City, Mexico. A 10-year-old boy who lived with his mother, father, grandmother, and 2-year-old sister would happen upon an item that was so small and so seemingly innocuous that not a single person who came into contact with this item ever considered how potentially dangerous it could truly be. Now, it's unclear from reports where this boy discovered this item, as some believe he simply found it stashed away within the house that the family had just recently moved into, something that was potentially left behind and simply forgotten by a previous owner. This item was a small, metallic capsule. From most reports, this capsule at one point had been stored within a case, but somehow it managed to end up in the backyard of the family's home. One day, while playing in the yard, the 10-year-old boy would discover the capsule, and like all children his age, he found a fascination with the small, shiny object. Following some time messing around with the object, the boy would place the capsule in his pants pocket, where it would end up for what's believed to have been a few days. Following those few days with the capsule, the boy would lose interest, and the mother would end up discovering the object lying around the house. Not knowing what the item was, she simply took it and placed it in a cabinet within the kitchen, where it would sit amongst the family's dishware for the foreseeable future. As the month of April rolled around, the 10-year-old boy would begin to develop what could only be described as flu-like symptoms. He was tired, had a fever, and was constantly feeling nauseous. As more time went by, the symptoms would begin to worsen, with vomiting and diarrhea. The mother figured this had to be a flu-like bug of some kind, but the weirdest thing she discovered was a burn-like abrasion that had formed on the boy's thigh. This was in the same area where the boy's pants pocket would come to rest. As more days passed by, the mother would continue to urge her son to eat, drink, and rest, but the boy had zero appetite. As she continued to care for her son, the rest of the family would start to come down with the same symptoms to varying degrees of severity. On top of the entire family now seemingly being under the weather, the mother would open up the kitchen cabinet one day to find that all the glassware had blackened, almost like the glass had been burned. She found this to be extremely bizarre, but no one could figure out how this had come to be. Not a single person in the family thought twice about that little silver capsule that was still resting up in the kitchen cabinet. A couple more weeks would go by, and the 10-year-old boy would not get better. In fact, he was seemingly getting worse. This led to this family bringing him to the hospital, where they would administer antibiotics. The family felt confident that a round of antibiotics was all their son needed. But as days turned to weeks in the hospital, the boy was not improving. His fever would spike to 105 degrees. His breathing became ragged, and his diarrhea had turned bloody. The doctors were absolutely puzzled with the boy's condition and had no answers as to what more they could do for him. Tragically, after a few agonizing weeks in the hospital, the boy would end up passing away on April 29th. This left the family not only devastated over the loss of their child, but the doctors and family members were left no closer to an answer that they so desperately needed as every member of the family was sick. Their symptoms mimicking the same downward spiral that their son had just suffered. The mother was seemingly doing the worst, and as doctors continued to run tests, they simply could not find any answers. On July 19th, the mother, who at the time was 6 months pregnant, would also pass away, suffering the same horrible fate that her son had just endured. Then, on August 18th, The 2-year-old sister would pass on, and finally, the grandmother would succumb to the ordeal on October 15th. This left only one member of the family alive, the father. So what happened to this family? Well, as it turns out, that little innocuous capsule was the source of everything that would tragically plague this family. So what was in it? Inside that capsule was cobalt-60. Cobalt-60 is a synthetic radioactive isotope of cobalt with a half-life of 5.2714 years. It is artificially produced in nuclear reactors. It is also used for industrial radiography, detecting flaws in metal parts and in density and fill height switches. This capsule was made with lead in order to protect against radiation exposure, but the capsule was not sufficient enough on its own, which is why the capsule was initially stored within a case that was also lined with lead in order to ensure exposure did not occur. Further details on how the boy came into possession with the item are not clear in any of the reporting, but he would ultimately carry the item in his pocket for days. Furthermore, the item was stored within the house for months. This led to the 10-year-old boy being exposed to more radiation than the rest of the family. It is ultimately believed that the only reason the father survived in the end was because he wasn't home day in and day out. He would go to work for at least 5 days a week, while the mother, grandmother, and 2-year-old girl were all within the home far more consistently. The moment the boy came into contact with the capsule, the entire family's fate became set in stone. As a father myself, I can't imagine outliving my entire family through such an ordeal. Outliving a child is something that no parent wants to do, but to watch helplessly as every member of your family succumbs to the same terrible ending, that has got to be, unequivocally, the worst fate I have ever covered on the channel. Mikala Jones was a 44-year-old surfer who grew up in Hawaii. His father was a professional dentist who had a passion for surfing and surf photography. This passion was something that he passed on to all of his kids. Mikala would grow up with surfing in his blood. As he grew older, Mikala would flirt with surfing competitively. In his 20s, he would be introduced to the amazing surfing within the country of Indonesia. This led him to start splitting most of his time between hitting waves in Hawaii and Bali. Bali is a province of Indonesia and is the westernmost of the Lesser Sunda Islands. It's said that Mikala had a good eye for photography, something that his dad had a passion and love for as well. It wasn't long before Mikala would strap on a GoPro, and the beautiful images he would bring to the world were like no other. Photography is hard enough, let alone attempting to do so within the medium of surfing. But many would say that Mikala had a natural eye within the realm. Through my research, I found a line in an article that I feel really sums up who Mikala, the surfer, was in all of his glory. This article comes from surfline.com. I will link in the description box below. It states, "He continued to push the limits of expert tube riding in dangerous waves and helped reimagine how it could be photographed. Between his countless cover shots and video parts and his mesmerizing GoPro footage, Mikala was easily one of the 21st century's most photogenic surfers." That ultimately brings us to July 9th, 2023. Mikala, along with his wife and 3 children, were staying at the time at the Awara Resort, which is located in North Sapura. North Sapura is a district of Mentawai Islands Regency in Indonesia. It is located on the northern portion of the Sapura Island. Just like many days before, Mikala would head out to the beach early. The familiar feeling of the sand between his toes and the refreshing ocean breeze blowing through his hair. With his board in hand, he would proceed to hit the waves. For Mikala, surfing, it came naturally, like breathing. As another normal day of surfing was seemingly unfolding before him, Mikala would suffer what can only be described as a freak accident. As he waded out into the water, he would sit and wait for the perfect wave. One would finally show itself at around 9:15 a.m. As he got the wave, McCullough attempted to pull into the tube, and he simply didn't make it. For those that don't surf, the tube is a term used by surfers to describe riding well inside the curve or barrel of a finely shaped breaking wave. When the wave closed out, McCullough would fall, and the fin of his board would cut around 4 inches deep into his leg. The cut was approximately 10 centimeters long. Management at the resort would immediately call for transport to get McCullough to the hospital. But tragically, when he would arrive, he would be pronounced dead. Sadly for McCullough, when the fin of his board cut into his leg, it cut straight through his femoral artery. The femoral artery is the major blood vessel supplying blood to your legs. It's located in your upper thigh, right near your groin. When the femoral artery is cut, the blood loss is devastating. To make matters worse, McCullough would lose a tremendous amount of blood before he was able to even exit the water. When water comes into contact with a cut or wound, it can cause the blood vessels to swell and dilate, leading to increased blood flow and far more bleeding. When this happens, water can disrupt the body's natural clotting process. From all reports, McCullough was a shining light within the surfing community. He ultimately died doing what he loved throughout his entire life. On the flip side of things, McCullough was also a loving husband and father. He tragically leaves behind a wife and kids, and my sincere condolences go out to his entire family. If you've never checked out McCullough's photographic work, I highly recommend you take the time to do so. He has some absolutely awe-inspiring stuff out there that everyone should take the time to enjoy. Now, if you ever come face to face with a large predator in the wild, the goal is obviously not to get eaten. But in a lot of these situations, we as human beings don't really get a say in the matter. No matter how far up the food chain we ultimately believe we are, when we do come toe to toe with the predator in the wild, the location we believe we sit on said food chain can change in a heartbeat. After learning a lot through my research on this story, I have to strongly encourage everyone listening to avoid hyenas like your life depends on it. Hyenas, you say? Why that specific animal? Well, I'm about to tell you, but before I do, I want to give a little extra warning that viewer discretion is advised. The size of a typical hyena can weigh anywhere between 90 to 170 pounds, and they measure anywhere from 37 to 59 inches in length, with their typical shoulder height being around 29 to 33 inches. The most dangerous hyena would be the spotted hyena. They are the largest and most aggressive type of hyena on the planet. Now, most hyenas in the wild will avoid humans, but the spotted hyena has been known to attack on occasion. They typically target smaller children or the elderly, but ultimately, hyenas are known to be aggressive, opportunistic hunters. Going toe-to-toe with one would not end well for 99% of us. What ultimately makes the hyena even more terrifying is the way that it hunts and kills its prey. They typically work in packs, and they can chase down their prey over long distances while keeping up a pace of around 37 miles per hour or 60 kilometers per hour. Their tenacity and sheer will and determination means they aren't going to give up the hunt once it has begun. They typically chase their prey to exhaustion while repeatedly biting and attacking in quick bursts. They typically target the animal they're after's hindquarters, causing repeated injury. Once the animal is injured enough and completely exhausted, they typically will collapse, not having any energy left to put up a fight. From there, the real horror of what's about to happen sets in. Once the animal is down for the count, the pack will break off the hunt. They will then swarm the victim and begin to attack and devour areas like the belly, targeting the soft internal organs. To put it plainly, they consume you while you're still alive. I don't know about any of you, but I can't think of a more terrifying way to watch my life cease to be. Now, After sharing all that information, we're going to head to a story that takes place in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is a landlocked country located in southern Africa. It is most well known for its pronounced landscapes and diverse wildlife. It was November of 2020. In this region of Africa, November is one of the many drier months. In drier months, normal food and water is scarce for many of the animals that inhabit the region. This coincides with many of these animals traveling great distances in search of whatever kind of food source they can find. 87-year-old Tendai Masika lived in a small mud and wood hut in the rural region of Chiromanzu, which is located within central Zimbabwe. It was a Monday night, and Tendai had already called it a day and headed to bed. As he slept soundly, a pack of hyenas that were scouring the area would make their way into Tendai's hut. Tendai would wake up abruptly as the hungry predators made their move. Now, a man in his 20s, as fit as can be, would not stand a chance against such opportunistic predators. So for 87-year-old Tendai, the moment these animals committed to him being their prey, he stood very little chance. They would attack Tendai, biting at his legs and proceeding to drag him out of his hut. He would end up being dragged some 300 meters or 984 feet away from his home. When he was discovered the following day, the entire lower half of his body was gone. Bloody drag marks would tell the story, ultimately showing how little of a fight Tendai was able to put up against the pack of hyenas. In conclusion, I found a quote in an article by CNN from a man named Tinashe Farawo, the spokesman for the Zimbabwe Parks and Wildlife Management Authority. I will link the article in the description box below. This quote dives into why these animal attacks are taking place at an escalating rate. The quote states, "If we had enough resources, we would have translocated the animals from overpopulated areas to where there is less population. The problem is largely caused by overpopulation of animals. This has been compounded by the destruction of their habitats by climate change, while the COVID-19 pandemic has made matters even worse. In normal years, the wildlife authorities rely mainly on tourism for revenue, but tourism in 2020 is just as good as dead, which has left us without resources to fund our conservation efforts. As I stated prior, I strongly encourage you to avoid hyenas like your life depends on it. That's not to say that these animals, or any other predators in the wild, are bad. There really isn't good or bad within the animal kingdom. There's just hunt or be hunted. Survival of the fittest. I just want to say thank you all again for an unbelievable 2023. My goal is to take the channel to a whole new level this year, so stay tuned as I have a ton of ideas and content in the works. If you do enjoy the content I make, please take a moment to hit the like and subscribe button. It helps the channel continue to grow. Also, you can check the description box below and find the link to my merch store, tons of awesome designs, and the proceeds help fund the channel. For those of you that may be interested, I have a Cellar Dwellers membership tier for the channel. It's $2.99 a month and comes with some pretty cool perks, so if that interests you, then please go check it out. That is also linked in the description box below. This is not an AI channel. I do all the research, writing, recording, and editing for the channel myself, so anything that you do to support the channel is greatly appreciated. Until next time, I will see you all again as we head back into the cellar.